So I want to welcome everybody to this Connecticut State Grange sponsored webinar, Just the Facts, Hemp and Cannabis. This webinar is going to hopefully provide information for folks that want to ask great questions. But I thought we'd begin with just a brief welcome from our Connecticut State Grange president, Rob Buck. Rob, welcome.
Thank you. And I want to thank Vince for sort of heading up and agreeing to be the MC of the program and give us the information that he has. And thank you everybody else for tuning in. Glad to see everybody here willing to learn something about the subject. I think it's an important topic to understand as things continue to develop in this sphere.
Great.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Rob. We really appreciate it. And let me just provide a little bit of background information so that we're all on the same level in order to have Vince then present to us. Here in Connecticut, we've been working, like many state granges, to bring on new members and rejuvenate granges. And when we were out this past year recruiting members for Granby Grange number 5, the number one question, which really surprised me, was what's the national Grange policy on hemp and cannabis? I then had the opportunity to go to the National Grange Convention in Reno, and one of the resolutions and policy decisions that came out of that meeting was to establish a National Grange Policy Committee on hemp and cannabis. So I asked if I could be appointed to that committee, and I was, and that's how I got to meet Vince. And we actually have a hemp farmer here in Granby, Connecticut, as well as a state representative here in Granby who's very interested in this topic and wants to be supportive of farmers. And so on the National Grange Policy Committee, we said, how can we really advance the discussion on this topic? So we are working on some resolutions to bring to Niagara Falls to our national convention this year. And we also thought we ought to put together a presentation to give to Grangers to help answer questions they may have on hemp and cannabis. There's a lot of myths, fallacies, misinformation out there. So Vince Scholten put together a presentation, Hemp and Cannabis, the truth and history behind it. And Vince is the California State Grange Vice President, as well as the State Grange Agriculture Committee Chair, and is on the policy committee at the national level on hemp and cannabis. This presentation is going to be taken to all the regional Grange conferences. But because we don't have one scheduled here in the Northeast, we chatted with our national president and said, we'd like to do a webinar on this. So Rob Buck agreed to that. We are recording this so people can share this information and hopefully really elevate the understanding of this issue so that we can, when and if new resolutions or policies come forward, they can have the information they need. So Vince, I'm going to turn it over to you. I've given screen sharing capability. So can you share your presentation?
Do you still have the presentation yourself to be able to share? I have it on my computer up.
Okay.
I was just going to punch in my email too, so that if anybody wanted to ask any questions,
perfect.
I could answer those via email.
Okay.
Let's see here. So if you go into the chat, you'll be able to see my email in there. And then let me see if I can't pull this up. I don't know how to share that with my iPad though. And
Okay.
do you have it?
I don't, Vince.
Let's see how I do this then.
Can you send it to Dave by way of an email attachment?
I'm gonna sure try right now. I just assumed that you had that, so I didn't. And of course, my IT person, my wife, is in Montana right now.
Well, shame on her.
I was supposed to be there too, so
Well, shame on you.
yeah, exactly.
Vacation or business?
My daughter's going to Montana State, and
Oh,
so
cool.
she has a check-in day today to check out the dorms, get your room, and get
Early.
going there.
Yeah, good.
So last time, Vince, you shared it on your screen. Remember, we did it that way. So I didn't have a copy.
Yeah, but that was when my wife was sitting next to me.
So if you do email it to me, I can quickly pull it up. Vince is also a hemp farmer in California and very active in the Grange out there, and their state Grange has brought some resolutions in the past to the national convention on this topic.
And it's just not working for me, of course. Let me try this on my iPad and see if I can't get this.
Dave,
Yes.
should you stop sharing your screen?
Thank you, Barbara.
Maybe.
And Mark Anderson, it's good to see you out there from Connecticut, Granby, Connecticut.
Likewise, thanks for hosting this. I'm a passenger right now, so mostly. Andrew Herzon's going to join shortly if he hasn't.
Excellent. And Andrew is Addison Farms here in Granby, who is also. Oh, Vince, I remember looking at your screen last time.
All right, let's see here. It looks like it's coming up. I'll see if I can't share this now.
You can tell we practice this multiple times.
Well, worst case scenario is I'm going to email it to you right now. What's your email?
That's what I would say to do.
Granby David Roberts at gmail.com.
Go ahead and spell it out for me.
GranbyDavidRoberts at gmail.com.
So I got Granby David Rob is where I
ROB.
Oh, I got it right here.
Yep. Yep.
It came up automatically. So I'm going to
That's
send that
me.
to you. All right. You should have that any second.
Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
You got it.
Excellent.
Ready.
Okay,
All right,
Vince?
so you'll just have to scroll on that one.
Yep.
I'm trying to pull it up on my screen so that I can see it. All right, I got it here. So this is just the facts: hemp and cannabis versus marijuana. What's the difference? The difference is botanically nothing. They are the same exact plant. They are Cannabis sativa L for hemp, and cannabis is Cannabis sativa L. There's botanically zero difference. How do they get classified between hemp and cannabis? Well, legally, it's the amount of THC that the plant produces. Hemp has to be less than 0.03% for the legal limit, and cannabis is anything more than 0.03% THC. THC being the tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the active ingredient in cannabis, i.e. the aspect that produces a high feeling. An example would be the difference between hemp and cannabis THC levels can be explained as the sugar content in apple varieties, say a Gala apple versus a Granny Smith. They have different levels of sugars in them. Cannabis and hemp would be essentially the same. One has a little bit more THC and one has a little bit less. The history of hemp is pretty incredible if you look at it. Supposedly originated in Asia, has been used for about 10,000 years as food fiber, oil, and medicine. It's one of the first cultivated agricultural crops known to mankind. Its famous uses include mentionings in the Bible and found in the Jewish temple at Tel Arad in Israel. The Gutenberg Bibles were actually printed on hemp paper, made from clothing, rags, and hemp fibers. The first two drafts of the Declaration of Independence were actually written on hemp paper. It was used in the United States forever, up until, 1938, 39. It was made illegal. The expansion of motorized shipping, cotton could be imported in bulk and at cheaper costs at the time. The cotton gin kind of helped with that. In 1938, hemp was called the new billion-dollar crop. In 1939, the American government began imposing restrictions. Harry Anslinger, tied to the oil industry, was the head of the top U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, promoted the demonization of cannabis for over 30 years. And it kind of went on from that for years. Obviously, there was some political stuff that helped keep that illegal. And then again, it was legalized in the 2018 Farm Bill. Hemp was defined as an agricultural commodity and removed from the controlled substances list. Cannabis is still considered a Schedule I drug with no medical use, which we'll discuss a little bit further, but there are so many medical uses for this crop. What can it do for agriculture? It was America's #1 crop in the 1800s. hemp biofuel is the only alternative fuel to complete EPA Tier 1 health effects testing under the Clean Air Act in the USA, which means that when you burn hemp or cannabis ethanol, you're actually burning O2, which is straight oxygen, out of your tailpipe, versus, even corn ethanol burns CO2 out the back tailpipe. So it has some huge ramifications for fuel, biomass, pharmaceuticals. And, hemp is one of the more ecologically friendly fossil fuels than other biofuels. You almost need zero fertilizers. It grows in just about every climate, and it grows in just about every soil, which means that you can grow it just about anywhere, which is quite interesting because I don't botanically know of another plant on the planet that can do that. There's maybe some weeds, but they're just not going to have an oil content or, the uses that this plant can have. Products that can be created from hemp and cannabis: paper, obviously, we can stop cutting down trees. Foods, proteins, and commodities. There are proteins in the seeds, and so we can use it as an animal feed. We can use it as a human feed for proteins. The commodities, the sky's the limit as far as commodities. Anything you can make with oil, you can make with cannabis. Clean energy, biomass fuel. One of my big ones that I use today is, I pulled this out of books 30 years ago, and it's still valid today. 1 ton of hemp or cannabis biomass will produce a little over 2 barrels of clean burning ethanol fuel, which we can drive our cars on. Textiles, fabrics, garments, our clothes that we wear today with cotton only last for a couple of years, whereas the hemp products and fabrics can last for literally generations. Textiles, we're talking about hempcrete, plywood. There's just so much that you can make out of it. Medicines and research. Some of the stuff that I read was that we could get rid of 80% of our pharmaceutical industry. 80% of our pharmaceutical industry. That's huge. Non-toxic paints and plastics. Biodegradable plastics would be a really good one today. We've created plastics using synthetic oils for the last 50 years. And we're coming to find out that they're in our oceans, our streams, our soil, our fish, and it's becoming a problem. The non-toxic paints too are phenomenal compared to, because they last longer on the building. Erosion and weed control. Hemp and cannabis have a very fibrous root system, so you can use it as a soil remediation. You can plant it on hillsides, and that hillside's not going to erode away. It will actually weed out the weeds, and because it grows like a weed. Construction and building materials. This is a field that a lot of people just absolutely know nothing about. Hempcrete, which is made from the ligum fibers of hemp and cannabis, are actually, when they're built into a concrete and we make blocks out of them, they're stronger than steel. So, the plywood that we're using for press board now can all be made out of hemp and cannabis, which helps with forest preservation. We don't have to cut down trees to, build houses or anything made out of wood. We did speak a little bit to the proteins. Cereals and animal feed would be the next one for proteins that are absolutely, people haven't even talked about yet. These can be fed to animals creating a cleaner feed for the animals, high in protein, and cereals that we ourselves can eat. And then, of course, since ships began, cordage and netting can all be made out of hemp. And it was the sought after rope or cordage that sailors would use across the planet for the last 1,000 years. It's interesting that the cordage is still made today, but it's all imported. So we're importing that from some other country that's smart enough to grow it. I think the products that it can make, this is just a small list of, the sky's the limit when you talk about anything that's made with oil or plastics or fibers can be made out of hemp and cannabis. There's a lot more to this plant than we're being led on to believe. Most people know it as this plant that the hippies used to smoke, and there's just so much more to it. And so this has been my educational thing, to try to educate people that there is a lot more to this plant than what we're being told or looked at. If you go to the next slide, you'll kind of see the many uses of the stalk as well, from the roots, leaves, flowers, stalk, and seed. And you can kind of take a look at those, that we covered a couple of those, but insulation, animal bedding, organic compost, looking for the things that I didn't mention so far, cooking or seasoning oil, flour is another one that we can make out of it. The hemp nuts, we can make milk and dairy, bakery goods, beer, dietary supplements, body care products, animal feed we talked about, granola, protein powders, fuel, of course, we talked about a little bit, and paint. That's just above the ground. Below the ground, with the roots, you get medicines, organic compost, and then the leaves and flowers have, mulch compost, medicine, recreation, animal bedding. So there's a huge amount of uses here for this plant, from the top to the bottom, the roots to the leaves. And so the next thing is what can it do for the Grange? This is the big call. This is what we're really looking to do, is change the National Grange's ideologies on cannabis.
Vince, I was just holding up my hemp body wash. I never noticed it until I saw it in the store the other day. And at Dollar Tree, for $1.25, you can get hemp body wash made in the USA of hemp seed oil, hemp heaven. So it's amazing the products that are out there.
And they're coming up with all kinds of new products now. But still, it's considered a Schedule I drug. And so a lot of that research and development is stifled. I think in the next 10 or 15 years, the amount of farmers that are going to switch into hemp or cannabis is going to skyrocket. One, the cost of growing it's going to go down. The seed and the flower is going to get cheaper and cheaper, and people are going to be able to go, hey, I want to make this new product, and they're going to come up with, new ideas, new things to use this for. I think that for the Grange, it can bring in a lot of small family farmers, to the tune of about 50,000 farmers, I'm guessing, in the first couple of years. It can help agriculture be less polluting to the environment. There's really not a whole lot of things that attack this plant, or have problems with, where I need to spray them or add extra fertilizer or runoff from those fertilizers. And it gives an opportunity to the small farmers to be self-reliant. Obviously the industry is semi-collapsed in California. The price, of even a pound of cannabis has plummeted. But those small farmers still have that chance to be self-reliant or add it to their So let's say that they grow vegetables and they have just a small plot of cannabis on the side, and they make, an extra $10,000 or $15,000 a year. That's helping that small farmer grow those vegetables because it's part of their system. And, another big part is to be inclusive of all forms of agriculture. I mean, this starts with a seed, we water it, it grows into a plant, we harvest the plant. And so it's the definition of agriculture, really. And I think that it can help the Grange grow farmers and be more sustainable as far as, making those little farmers have a chance to survive. And then the last one on here is the future has endless possibilities. And that was one of my first ones, was to fuel your car. Methanol, 1 ton of biomass is equal to 2 barrels of methanol, or sorry, ethanol. It says methanol, but it should say ethanol. That is an incredible amount. And when I looked at my books from 30 years ago, it was viable when a crude barrel of oil was $15 to $20 per barrel. Well, crude oil today is right around $70 to $90 a barrel. So you can see, and it burns clean. There's no CO2 coming out your tailpipe. There's just O2 coming out of your tailpipe. You can expect about 10 tons per acre in about 90 to 120 days. Other than bamboo, I don't know anything that grows that fast. Anything. There is no other plant that grows that fast and produces that much tonnage. Biodegradable plastics. And I've been spewing this for quite a number of years because of the plastics problem in our society. New medications, building products from particle board to cement. It is endless the products you can make with this plant. Anything you can make with oil, you can make using this plant. Clothes that are more ecological to grow and will last 10 times longer than our common cotton clothes that we wear today. Methane production, which can be used instead of natural gas. So there's a process to create methane out of the oils that we're pulling off of this plant. So the natural gas industry, we can stop drilling down and having subcision of our soils, where the soil actually collapses a little bit when we pull that gas out. Can be really useful things for our environment. The per acre output of biomass fuel is 10 times more than corn. And that's our #1 ethanol maker today, is corn. So the per acre output is 10 times more than corn. Common questions: if hemp has too much THC, what happens? It must be destroyed. If it is labeled cannabis, it must be from a regulated market and tested for any chemicals and THC content. Chemical pesticides, herbicides, insecticides are not allowed in the regulated market. So they're not allowed to use any chemicals whatsoever to grow the plant right now. All hemp must be tested before sold. All hemp products are guaranteed to have less than 0.03% THC. If it is more, it is considered hot and it has to be destroyed. So let's say it comes up at 0.031, it has to be destroyed. And then the sources here, really the main one, who did all of this research work, is Jack Herrera, and the book is The Emperor Wears No Clothes. If you can go to the library and check it out. But very interesting stuff in there. And so that completes the kind of PowerPoint, and I'd love to answer questions for you.
Well, Vince, thank you so much. I did want to recognize that Burton Eller, for our National Grange Legislative Director, is on. Welcome, Burton. He's muted.
Thank you. I'll
right
get
now.
off mute. Thank you.
There you are. Hi, Burton.
Hello.
And I know you love this topic on Capitol Hill.
Well, it's probably not as much fun as in the National Grange annual session.
Yes, yes. So anyways, but one of the things that we had said was that we were gonna keep this a safe setting for people to ask questions. And so we now wanted to see what questions people might have. And so if you have a question and you want to let us know what it is, please let us know.
Hey, Dave,
Yes,
it's Frank Forrest. Hey, this actually is not a question. In that initial opening of the talk about hemp, very few people talk about it, but Thaddeus Fairbanks in Vermont invented a scale to weigh wagons for weighing the hemp from the farmers to make rope. And Fairbanks scale has become the largest, one of the largest scale manufacturers in the world, and basically all because of hemp. That's my 2 cents.
thank you, thank you. Excellent. Others you have, Barbara. You're muted, Barbara.
Sorry. Can it be used in today's engines? You were talking about it being biofuel.
So when you go to the gas station and you see the thing that says ethanol or an ethanol blend,
That's corn.
that's corn. We can also make that out of cannabis, but at 10 times more than corn. And here's one little note to that. When you burn corn ethanol, you burn CO2 out of your tailpipe. When you burn hemp or cannabis ethanol, you burn O2. So it's just oxygen that comes out of your tailpipe. So it's a clean burning fuel.
But you can use it today if you make that biofuel?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can drive our cars on it.
You mentioned that you can make food out of it. What kind of food?
So the hemp seed can be crushed and made into flour, which anything you can make with flour, you can make with hemp flour or cannabis flour. And it's pulverized and it looks just like flour.
And you said that the hemp paints last longer, but you didn't say longer than what?
A regular synthetic paint. So most of the paints today are patented by DuPont, and not to diss them, but they own the patents. And so they make a royalty on every brushstroke you make.
Okay, I know there are 2 states, and I believe Pennsylvania, and I can't remember the other, have the old kind of paint still that you can get. That will last longer also.
Is it a lead based or is it a hemp based?
Lead.
Lead based, yeah. That we've come to find out isn't a great thing, because when it peels off or you go to repaint that house and you peel that paint back off, the person that's doing that work is actually ingesting the lead.
They need to wear a mask.
Yeah, yeah. This would be completely clean and last about the same as the lead paints.
How long do you think it'll take for any of these ideas to come to fruition?
Well, we have to start by educating people, 1. 2, it has to be taken off the scheduled drug list. Right now, it is a Schedule 1 drug.
Not hemp.
Hemp is not, but the industries that would support hemp production and cannabis production are not in place. There's other countries, India, China, I believe it's either Afghanistan or Pakistan, have set up industries to process this. And we have not done that yet.
Yes, that was my question. How long do you think we will take to, or will we never do that?
Well, there's no incentive for somebody to do that if the cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, because you cannot do research and development on it. I'm running into that problem now.
Okay.
Is that I cannot do the research without it costing an astronomical fund.
Okay.
So I look at it as taking baby steps. I wish that we would have started this, 20 or 30 years ago, especially for the biodegradable plastics. Because I find the plastics is one of the big ones that is polluting our environment quite extensively. And then the fuel, I mean, we could be burning straight oxygen out of our tailpipes versus CO2, which is part of the problem with global warming, climate change. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Vince, we've got two hands up. First, Noel Miller, and then Representative Mark Anderson. Then we've got some questions in the chat. So Noel Miller is a past Connecticut State Grange president. He chairs our legislative committee for the State Grange. So Noel, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Vince, when you're talking about biomass for ethanol, can the plants at the ethanol corn be utilized to convert hemp into ethanol?
That would be a kind of a technical question. I think they can be fairly close because that process is really similar. But I think breaking up the plant, the legumes in the plant is the issue. Whereas with corn, you're more pulling out the sugars. So it's a little bit of a different process, but I think they can be fairly similar. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The other one is when you're talking about fibers into bricks and all that, is there a decay time as far as from harvest to implementation of so that can the fibers break down so that
you want those fibers when you go to process those fibers, you want it still in a semi-green state so that you can break it up without it cracking.
okay.
And then those fibers become long strands, kind of like I don't want to say asbestos, but strands of material.
Fiberglass.
And when that's mixed in with the concrete, it becomes a bond.
Right. And that's what fiberglass has been done by
Correct.
reinforcing concrete with fiberglass because it has a long shelf life rather than a short shelf life. So every 180 days you get a new crop of material to put in for your concrete type of thing.
That's correct. Or
Okay.
insulation. That's another one that we didn't really delve into, but insulation for houses.
Now what happens if
properties.
what happens if it gets wet in the house? Does it mold? Does it break down? Does it?
Once you pull the legume out there, no, it stays pretty solid. Like the hempcrete, has a 150-year breakdown.
Yep.
I think that's what the number was. Don't quote me on that number, but I think it was somewhere near that. But then the fibers are still in there. It's just that if you were to break that brick apart, it would crumble easier after that 150 years.
Okay. Thank you. The last one I have, 1939, when was turned into a class 1 drug. Was it the morality case that did it, or was it the petroleum phase that did it?
It was actually probably a 4-part setup here, and without going into a conspiracy theory here, which I tried to stay away from. You had several factors: the oil industry, DuPont, who owned the patent on paint, and the pharmaceutical industry. So we're going up against some really big boys, and I think that the truth needs to come out now. I mean, if we can burn fuel in our vehicles that burn straight O2 out of the tailpipe, I'm in, because I don't want to buy electric cars. I want a motor. Yeah. But I'm
Thank
a
you.
farmer too. So, I use motors. And if I have to switch everything to electric, I'm looking at problems down the road. So, but it was a multi-pronged approach. William Randolph Hearst had a big part of that. The media, he owned the newspapers and pushed it pretty hard, and demonized it, and said, it's a black thing, and this is just the poor people that smoke this stuff. But they never brought up any of this information that I'm showing you today. So it was a multi-pronged approach, and the big guys all bought into it because they were going to make more money. Yep.
Thank you.
Let's go to Representative Mark Anderson, who's also a Grange member. Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much for having this call. I hope that the Granby hemp farmer will chime in, but I'll try to tell some of our experiences the last 2 months. I keep hearing cannabis, but the hemp farmers want to keep a wall of separation, and cannabis. Hemp is not a Schedule I drug like cannabis, but because of some bad actors, recent legislation has, lumped in the good with the bad and made it so that two main products that Andrew sells, he won't be able to sell after July 1st if the governor signs this. So, they put an arbitrary amount of, I believe it's, and I left my copy of the bill at the Capitol, and so Andrew, feel free to correct, but I think it was 5 grams per container, totally arbitrary. And his products are below 0.3%. We tried to get an amendment to have a ratio of THC to CBD of 1 to 25, and that failed, which apparently Virginia passed this year. So all I'm looking for is, anything Andrew could add, I hope before the call's over, if Grange could help come up with like model legislation, it would give real legitimacy to the plight of hemp farmers. I heard about all these industrial products, but I'm guessing most of the cash is in the CBD products. But some of these seem to be, trying to evade the cannabis laws, and therefore in a big net to stop them, they hurt, the few hemp farmers, which I'm told 70 at some point have applied for a license. In Connecticut, I believe there might be 30 who have kept the license, and only 2 or 3 who are doing it, as a primary. But I hope before the call is over, Andrew can add his 2 cents and questions, and if anyone has ideas for fixing the legislation.
Well, I think one of the big things is right now, the Grange is supportive of hemp, but not cannabis. And I think if the Grange can help declassify or deschedule the cannabis, some of those federal regulations will ease, which will make it easier to do the research and development. I think at the beginning of the call, he mentioned that I am a cannabis farmer. I actually don't grow any cannabis other than the plants. I do research and development, and I have a nursery. So I don't grow any of the product, but I want to do the research and development, and I've come up against one brick wall after the next. And you can only throw so much money at the wall before your wife goes, I don't think so.
Andrew, you're our local hemp farmer in Granby, Connecticut, and we've gotten to know you, and you've gotten to know Representative Mark Anderson, and we have been following this, and as a local Grange, trying to understand what we can and can't do to help you. But did you want to add anything to this conversation at this point?
Oh, yeah, I could add a ton to the conversation. I just don't want to take up everybody's time. It's first of all, thank you for putting this together and allowing me to be here. And thanks to Representative Anderson for putting in those amendments, and Connecticut still needs to try to figure it out. He was correct in saying they put an arbitrary limit. He was talking about in a tincture, it's actually 1 milligram per milliliter of THC and 25 milligrams per container. And again, for us, we grow a very healthy plant And in the concentration, we don't adulterate it. It's just the plant in a bottle. And our product just so happens to have 50 milligrams of THC, a completely non-intoxicating product. It has 1,200 milligrams of CBD, and it was just lopped into this whole legislature. So again, I really do think that what we should be looking at from a standpoint of legislation should be intoxicating versus non-intoxicating products, because those are completely different avenues. It's the same reason we don't have water in a liquor store. Water is a clear liquid, so is vodka, but they clearly have very different ways of affecting the body. And I must say, I do appreciate the whole presentation as well, because I know, being an engineer by trade, the multitude of uses of hemp. In fact, I happen to not be wearing it right now, but normally I'm wearing a hemp t-shirt. So, yeah.
I'm wearing it for you.
Yeah. So, the plant itself is amazing. It is the second fastest growing plant in the world. Bamboo is the first, but that grows for years underground before it shoots, up above ground. There are wonderful things, energy, textiles, building materials that can all be made from it. The main issue I would say that we have in the United States is, if you go search for a processing facility or you search for a textile mill, they do not exist anymore. They were shipped out in the 70s. All of our mills, all of our production is now condos, apartments, and office buildings. So that's the first hurdle you have to get over. And I do agree with the sense of, cannabis was definitely, reefer madness and the stigma that's associated with it really put a detriment to it. But if you were to look at hemp grown in an industrial sense, it is 10 to 100 times better than pretty much any other crop that's out there. It doesn't take pesticides. It doesn't take water. In fact, last year I grew 2,700 plants within 30 by 100. So 1 foot spacing, and I have those plants in hand, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with them. I have a ton of mass, but I haven't been able to process them, because where would you process them? So we're working on all these things, from a standpoint, we're working on it in the background. But I think the reality is that almost every product that you use or think about is actually a farm product. From the clothing you wear to the cars you drive, they've all come from a farm, or they're petroleum based. Now, the beauty of that is that they can be utilized from a plant-based. It's just the technology is trying to catch up. And I have to say, like with ethanol, I think you pointed out, the hemp stalk is full of cellulose. It's wonderful. It's if you could turn it into fermentable sugars, you could make ethanol. There's just a problem with getting those sugars out of the stalk, because it has to be milled down to a certain amount, and there's chemical operations that have to happen. So the technology is coming. We're catching up. I know there's battery technology that they're trying to get out of it. You could turn it into just straight carbon and use it for battery technology. I mean, there's just a multitude of uses on it. And, like I said, unfortunately, Connecticut kind of put a big hindrance on full spectrum products right now. And we're in the process of figuring out the next steps for us as a business on what we're going to do. But the reality is there's so much more that needs to be done. And it's not for us, it's for the kids and our grandkids who are going to need manufacturing jobs, who are going to need a society and an infrastructure that they can live and work in. And I think that's where I really fall, is trying to build that infrastructure from scratch, essentially.
Right. I think until we fully legalize this plant, whether it's hemp or cannabis, I think that the big corporations aren't going to invest money, because they don't know which way it's going to go yet. If we go backwards again, because the big guys put out false information out there that it's, it's ruining the youth, and, they just look at one aspect of this plant. Why would you invest $50 billion into a processing plant?
Well, even further, if you take it, even look at what just happened. I mean, we're a very small farm. We're about a half a mile away from the Grange, so within proximity. We're less than 2 acres. I can't imagine if I spent $500,000 on a bunch of equipment and extraction facility, and I mean, I would be losing my mind right now.
Well, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I've spent about $250,000 just getting a permit.
Right. So we're here trying to figure out, well, we're building a small business, but the reality is the market itself has fluctuated so much that even to grow, right, even if a farmer had a nice farm, 100-acre farm, and they had the ability to grow hemp right now, great, they grow the plant, they harvest the plant, they have nowhere to take it.
Yeah.
So there has to be some movement in the next steps so that those plants can be processed. And that's where I think, where you were saying the 50,000 farms are going to come from. Yes, 100%. If there's a factory that will buy your acre for $4,000, well, yeah, you could then structure it and grow your farm.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's look at some of the questions in the chat here. Stephen Coy from New York said, does the grower have any control over whether or not his crop will be hot? Vince.
So this was interesting because I grew hemp before I grew cannabis. And this was for a finished product of hemp to be made into a salve. And the whole time I'm growing it, I go, well, if the breeder that I got my seeds from didn't do something properly, or some other seed got mixed in and those were what was tested, my crop would come up hot and I would have to throw it all away. And so as a farmer, I was worried for the 120 days that I was going to have to throw everything away. It's a gamble. And this was all grown inside of a greenhouse. So I'm not, growing it outside where Mother Nature could, a big heavy rainstorm or a hailstorm or a typhoon comes through. It's all gone. This was all grown inside. And still I'm concerned the entire time that I might have to throw it all away.
So Vince, this kind of ties into that question from our state president, Rob Buck. Right now, with the legalization of marijuana, the moves to increase THC. So with pushing hemp, it seems like the plant needs to be bred with lower THC. How much is being done in this direction so the plants don't need to be destroyed because of the Schedule I classification?
So here's the thing. The second that I got my cannabis license, I was no longer allowed to grow hemp. So I cannot breed between hemp and cannabis. That is federally illegal. So it makes no sense, but that's just the way it is right now. I'm not allowed to breed hemp into cannabis and cannabis into hemp.
But
It's
that didn't
illegal.
answer the question.
I'm sorry, repeat the question one more time.
So the question was, with pushing hemp, it seems the plant needs to be bred with lower THC. How much is being done in this direction so plants don't need to be destroyed because of the Schedule I classification?
There's actually quite a bit of work, but they're only working with varieties that have less than 0.03%. So there is no, as a plant breeder, I look at it and I go, well, hey, if I breed this plant into it, I'm going to get a different terpene profile and use it for a different chemical additive for some other pharmaceutical. It still has below 0.03% THC, but I'm not allowed to breed that plant.
And another thing, and we're not going to dive real deep in this, but on the National Policy Committee, one of the things we've learned is like you hear a lot about 0.03%. And so you think this was probably written on the 10 Commandments or something. This was an arbitrary thing that was plucked out of what I would call voodoo science research. And Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've tried learning as much as I can on this topic. And there's really no relevance to that 0.03%. It was something that came out during the Nixon administration, correct?
Yeah, this actually came out in Colorado when they first legalized. They were the first ones to legalize. Before that was California that did it for medicinal uses. And so it came out of those days as well, where they had to set a standard for hemp and cannabis, and they separated them at that point. And so they came up with a 0.03 because anything less than maybe 5 or 8% isn't even going to get you high. So they went below that standard to make sure that you could not get high off of it or abuse it. Little did they know that you could take that same hemp plant, take that 0.03%, distill it all down, take out the Delta 9, and get high as a kite off of it.
And Vince, just to be sure, because a question just popped up, it is 0.03, not 0.3, because originally on the policy committee, we were using the wrong thing, but it's 0.03.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure about that. Now, Dan asked, isn't everyone actually following USDA regulations? And this tied into something you were saying earlier.
The growers that I deal with and know, yes, but there are bad actors out there. Absolutely. Whether they're growing hemp and selling it as cannabis, or they're growing cannabis and distilling the oil out of it and selling it as hemp. So, I mean, there's bad actors in every field. But somebody like myself who wants to do the research on it then is hindered by the laws and regulations that have been put forth.
And then Debbie Handlin asked for Vincent Andrews, what was your plan for growing hemp? You talk about a crop that you can't process. I would think you'd have a plan beforehand. And then she makes an editorial comment that I so agree with. And she says, hemp clothing is so soft.
Yeah. You know, the reason why I started growing hemp, and I can only speak for myself, was for the oil content for salves that were being given to medical patients. So I had a friend that was putting together these salves and wanted hemp oil.
Andrew?
Yeah, for me, it was, it's kind of a longer story, but I just want to say it is 0.3% Delta 9 THC is the limit. I just want to verify that. But yeah, for me, when I started growing, it's a long story. We ended up, both my wife and I are kind of broken. We both played soccer in college. My wife's way better than me. She played in the NCAA finals for the UConn women's team. So for soccer. So we were pretty kind of broken, and my sister actually invited us out to Colorado. And she said, hey, why don't you come out here and grow some hemp? And our life changed pretty drastically. And we said, okay, let's go out and see what we can do. Unfortunately, it didn't work out there. So we came back to Connecticut with no house, no jobs, and a 2.5-year-old in tow. And we decided, hey, we really enjoyed farming. We really enjoyed being outside. And it just so happened the hemp pilot program was going into place in Connecticut. And we decided to kind of dive 2 feet in. At that point, we were kind of looking at the CBD market and saying, I don't trust any of these products. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know who's growing them, if they're coming from overseas. So we said, let's grow it ourselves. It was a very steep learning curve to grow a farm from scratch. But we initially, I guess out in Colorado, had planned to just grow for biomass, to just sell in bulk to an extractor, kind of just do it for the money side of things. When we came back to Connecticut, we realized that one, the cost of biomass had gone down significantly. It was like $100 a pound when we were out in Colorado, but as things got inundated, it went down to 5, 10, 15 pounds dollars per pound. So at that point, we said, no, this doesn't make sense for us to grow for that. And then I had my first experience with any type of hemp or CBD product. We actually had flour, and I baked it into a pumpkin bread, my grandmother's recipe. And I said, I don't know, let me try this out. And it ended up being about 20 milligrams per slice. I ate it, and I went out and worked, and my back, which I had 2 cortisone shots in a couple of years prior, I stood up and I go, wow, I feel really good right now. And at that point, I realized I need to give this to everybody. And it just went and made sense for business to grow a brand and to actually go direct to consumer. I think that's one of the difficulties with, a farm in general is, well, where's your biggest bang for the buck? And the reality is, when you realize that you're doing something that is great and giving products that are really helping people, it makes it very easy to go direct to your consumers and talk to your local people and sell products to them, especially something that you truly believe in.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sam, I see your hands up. You're muted, Sam.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great day. I just wanted to throw out an update. So I'm vice president of Hessel Farmers Grange over there with Vincent Scholten in Sebastopol, California. And I just wanted to provide an update because I also sit as the head of communications, sponsorship, and fundraising development for the Origins Council. The Origins Council is a organization based in California, represents small cannabis producers throughout the state of California. But we've also helped found and form the National Craft Cannabis Coalition, which is a working group including the state of Connecticut and 6 other states, New York, Washington, Oregon, Vermont, many others. So I think they're a very significant ally in this and having up-to-date information as far as the cannabis side of things. The hemp side of things, also very, very specific. And, the trouble is, and I'm so with, Margot put some comments in the chat regarding research. I think that research is incredibly important. We just got awarded the first and largest grant from the DCC, the Department of Cannabis Control in California. It's a $2.7 million grant to study genetics, the stewardship of these genetics, and the oral histories of the communities that have bred these genetics for generations. So there's very significant components here, and I do think that public health needs to be a consideration on the cannabis side of things as far as anything consumed. That includes hemp and anything you can derive from the hemp plant. But we need to get through those hurdles and increase the research, education, and the R&D, as Vince mentioned multiple times, in order to get to a place where we can really utilize this plant to its fullest potential. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that, and also say that, including the comment from the National Grange regarding the bad actors and maybe more in this realm. It's just as we saw with prohibition and prohibition of alcohol. The more prohibited it is, the more bad actors you have. The faster you regulate something, and the more that you're able to bring it above board and make it accessible to the public in a controlled and viable manner, the less of a criminal dynamic you're going to have. So those are my 2 points. Just want to throw out there. And I work closely on the national front and state fronts and stuff like that. So here to support. I'm now the president of the first Big Island Grange out here on the state of Hawaii as well. So thanks.
Excellent.
Thank you, Sam, for being here today.
Thank you, Sam. We appreciate that. So the purpose of this webinar, and this is the first time we've done it to a group. This webinar is going to go to a Zoom webinar that our national president, Betsy Huber, is going to have with all state Grange presidents. This webinar is also going to be taken to all the other regional conferences. But if anybody on this call or anybody in your Granges has an interest in this topic, I encourage you, the Connecticut State Grange Convention is October 19th to the 21st in Norwich, Connecticut. And I'm sure there's going to be some resolutions possibly coming up on this topic, or maybe you want to propose something on this topic. I definitely know at the National Convention, which is November 14th to the 18th in Niagara Falls, there will be some proposed resolutions on this topic, whether from state Granges or whether from the National Policy Committee on Hemp and Cannabis. But it's really our opportunity, and it's so true that in Grange, we have an opportunity from the local level to the highest level to try to influence policy. We're so blessed with Burton Eller and Sean O'Neill and the others that support us doing policy in Washington with our national leaders. So I just want to encourage you all to go to your state convention, your national convention, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to have a copy of this that's available, and we will make sure that we share it with folks. I want to thank the national team for sharing the invite to this in A View from the Hill. Vince, did you have any concluding comments you wanted to make?
I think we've worked a lot of it out in California. We have passed a lot of resolutions here to help us in this fight against the illegalization of hemp and cannabis. But I think the true one, and I've been working at this for a while, is to deschedule it. Right now, it's a Schedule I drug, which is, I believe, higher than the heroin on the list. It's higher than fentanyl, which is killing a whole lot of people. So, I just encourage you to be smart about what you read, and educate yourself. I mean, drive a car burning straight O2 out the back. Wear clothing that lasts for 3 generations that you can pass down to your grandkids. Use 80% less pharmaceuticals. So those are my takeaways, and enjoy your day. Thank you for being here and listening. And if you do have questions, I did put my State Grange website or email on the chat. Text me, email me. I'd love to chat. I'd love to educate. And we'll keep moving forward.
Thank you, Vince. Connecticut State Grange President Rob, did you have any parting comments? Thank you for allowing us to do this with the Northeast leaders. We hope it's helpful, whether now live or when people watch this in the future. Rob?
Dave, I'd like to thank you for putting it together, and Vince, thank you for actually putting the work into the presentation and sharing that with us. That has all been very enlightening, and I hope that this all goes somewhere useful.
I do
Great.
too. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
the National Policy Committee is here to listen, to try to help educate. So if your Grange, wherever you are, has any questions, you see Vince's email there. But we want to help grow the Grange. We want to do this smartly. And so we really hope that this might be an area to do it. So thank you all for joining us for this webinar. We really appreciate it. Somebody asked how many registered, and we almost doubled how many attended versus how many registered, which was a great thing to have. And the only reason we asked for registration was we were using a Zoom account that had a cap of 100, and we wanted to make sure we didn't exceed it. So thank you all very much, and you all have a great day, and thank you for being Grangers. Take care.